Do you know how, at the beginning of the 20th century, what did they call an unimaginably wealthy person in Parisian salons? Rich as an Argentine. And that's not a joke. In 1913, the per capita income in Argentina was higher than in France, higher than in Germany, twice as high as in Spain and Italy. Millions of people from Europe came here in search of a better life. 100 years later, Argentines are covering their walls with banknotes. Because the peso is worthless and it's cheaper than buying wallpaper. The country has declared bankruptcy 9 times. That's a world record. And now every third Argentine lives below the poverty line. I traveled across Argentina from the end of the world to the tropics to understand how this country managed to lose everything it once had. And what I saw turned out to be even more interesting than I expected. While the country was losing one kind of wealth, it was actually sitting on another all along. Buenos Aires. The first thing that throws you off is that this doesn't look like Latin America. It looks like Paris. Just look around. Marble, stucco balconies with wrought iron. And this isn't just a facade. It's a receipt. Every building here says that there was once huge, real money here. Take, for example, the Teatro Colón. It's one of the best opera houses in the world in terms of acoustics. It was opened back in 1908. Just imagine, a country that could afford something like this wasn't just playing at being rich, it was breathing wealth. Or El Ateneo, a former theater that was turned into one of the most beautiful bookstores in the world. At the beginning of the 20th century, Argentina had a very high literacy rate, probably one of the highest on the planet. It wasn't just a wealthy country, it was an educated, cultured, and ambitious nation. 6 million migrants arrived from Italy and Spain. The British invested billions in the railways. The country's exports increased 25-fold. Here is La Boca, a working-class neighborhood by the port. This is exactly where the ships with immigrants would arrive. And this is where their dream began. You can see that the houses are painted with leftover paint from the shipyards. Well, whatever paint was available, whatever they managed to snatch, that's what they used. That's why there's such a riot of colors here. And in the evenings, dock workers would dance in the bars. And that's how tango was born. It's a dance of people who had nothing but hope. It seemed like Argentina had made it to the big leagues forever. But where did all this money come from in the first place? Well, the answer is right here in front of me, sizzling over the fire. This piece of meat, this is what the entire Argentine economy revolved around. When refrigerators were invented, Argentine beef started being shipped to Europe by the ton. Money started flowing like a river. There were theaters, palaces, boulevards. All of this was built on what is now sizzling in front of me. A single piece of meat made the country one of the richest on the planet. And it also became its trap. But inside this piece of meat, there was a hidden bomb. When the land feeds you, you don't learn anything else. Well, why build factories? Why develop any kind of technology? Argentina produced nothing except meat and grain. All the technology was imported, the capital was brought in by the British, and as for building factories, well, why bother if the land already provides? Imagine a person who inherited a huge fortune and decided there was no need to work. Well, there's simply no reason to. The first 20 years are great, but then the inheritance runs out. In 1929, global prices for meat and grain collapsed. And then it turned out that, aside from this piece of meat, Argentina didn't really have anything else. Over there is an expensive upscale neighborhood, and right behind me is Villa 31. 50,000 people live just a couple hundred meters from the palaces. Between them, there's just a single railway and 100 years of poor decisions. So what happened over those 100 years? Well, here's the Recoleta Cemetery, marble mausoleums of the Argentine aristocracy. And among them is the grave of the most beloved and the most destructive woman in the country's history, Evita Peron, or as she was called, Evita, the wife of President Juan Perón. For the poor, she was a saint. Her foundation gave out houses, sewing machines, scholarships. She was adored by the working class. And when she died of cancer at the age of 33, her body was embalmed, and people simply wept, in hours-long lines. I am standing at the grave of Evita Peron, the most beloved and the most destructive woman in the history of this country. When she died, 2 million people came to say goodbye. Then the military stole her body and secretly took it to Italy. For 16 years, it was hidden in a Milan cemetery under a false name. Later, it was returned to her husband in Madrid, and he placed the coffin in the dining room. His third wife would comb dead Evita's hair every evening. It sounds like nonsense, but this is a true story from this country. The problem wasn't that Evita's husband, President Juan Perón, helped the poor. The problem was how he paid for it, and what he paid with. For example, he went ahead and nationalized the railways, as well as all the banks, and at the same time, all exports too. And all these expenses, all this aid to the poor, he financed with the printing press. In other words, he just kept printing more and more money. From 1944 to 1974, the average inflation rate in Argentina was 26% per year. That is, the peso gradually started turning into just plain paper. Slowly, but steadily. And that's when Perón created the system that outlived him by 70 years and is still functioning today. That is, now a third of the country works for the government and lives on welfare. To this day, well, for example, in Argentine winemaking, right now grape growers don't have enough workers to harvest the crop. Why? Because people live on welfare. And if they get an official job there, they will simply lose these government benefits. Meat no longer feeds Argentina, but the habit of living on handouts remains. Next, then came 6 military coups in 50 years. Literally every government started by dismantling what the previous one had built. The right would come to power, open up the markets, take out loans, then the left would take over, do the opposite, nationalize everything and turn on the printing press. And this pendulum kept swinging for half a century without stopping. Well, what kind of business would invest if the rules of the game change every 5 years? None would. That's why capital fled Argentina. Argentina has declared default 9 times. That's a world record. And the pattern was always the same. When commodity prices go up, everything's great, there's money. We take out loans against that and hand out everything we've borrowed to the people, prices started to fall. There's nothing to pay the people with. We declare default, don't fulfill any obligations. A new government comes in, makes new promises, takes out new loans. Again, we can't fulfill them. Another default, and so on, over and over again. But one of these crises stands apart from the rest. We're on Florida Street in Buenos Aires. And here, every 10 meters, there are people shouting, "Cambio, cambio." They're offering to exchange dollars. These are arbolitas, street money changers. The police stand nearby and pretend not to see. This isn't just a black market. It's a monument to what happened in 2001 when the government took people's bank deposits. Back then, Argentinians started exchanging pesos for dollars on the very day they got paid because overnight the peso could lose value. The government kept the exchange rate fixed for 10 years. The peso was 1-to-1 with the dollar. Well, and when the reserves ran out and the debt became unbearable, what did people do? They rushed to withdraw their deposits, but the banks closed their doors. A withdrawal limit was announced. You could only withdraw $250 a week, no more. And for a country that literally lives on cash, this was paralyzing. People took to the streets with pots and pans. In just 1 week, 5 presidents were replaced. Poverty reached 55%. But the scariest part wasn't even that. In the end, the government simply converted those dollar deposits in the banks. They converted pesos into a currency that was already worthless. In effect, they just took people's money away. And the most important thing broke: people's trust in the government. Argentinians simply stopped trusting banks. According to various estimates, today, more than $160 billion are kept outside the banking system. That's more than the country's entire external debt. There is money, but it's under mattresses or in accounts in Miami, anywhere really, just not in the Argentine economy. And these very arbolitos on Florida Street, meaning the money changers, are a living reminder. A reminder of that very event. A country that was once richer than France turned into a country where people hide money under their mattresses. But then something happened. Something unexpected. The crisis of 2001 simply destroyed the economy. That's it, the peso collapsed. Argentina finally became impoverished. But for the rest of the world, it suddenly became cheap. And the country that people used to visit for its meat was now being visited for something entirely different. Already the following year, in 2002, just over 2 million tourists came to Argentina. And by 2017, almost 6 million, meaning it had tripled. Tourism had already grown to 4% of GDP and became one of the main sources of foreign currency for the country. But the most astonishing thing is that this didn't happen because someone planned it. It's just that the world finally saw what Argentina had been walking past all this time. For 100 years, while it was focused on meat, Ushuaia, the southernmost city on the planet, was originally established as a prison. Convicts were exiled here. Later, the government tried to populate this place with subsidies. And then, after the 2001 crisis, when the peso collapsed and Argentina became cheap, tourists started pouring in here. And the prison city became one of the main tourist centers in South America. No one planned this. But truly, no one ever planned that the city of prisoners, Ushuaia, would suddenly turn into a tourist hub. But after 2001, foreigners just flooded in here. Well, because where else could you find yourself at the edge of the world for that kind of money? And with snow-capped mountains, beautiful straits, forests, subantarctic ones at that. And right nearby is Martillo Island in the Beagle Channel. And there you can walk among the colony's penguins. That is, they're not behind glass somewhere, not in a zoo, not far away. You actually walk among them. They just waddle busily past you and don't pay any attention to you at all. And this is the currency generated by nature itself, without any factories, subsidies, or printing presses. And right next to it is Tierra del Fuego National Park. And it's stunning there, these subantarctic forests, icy lakes, trails along the strait. And the southernmost point of mainland Argentina is La Pataya Bay. All of this has always been here. It's just that before, no one ever thought that this could be sold. Well, the most striking story is that of El Calafate. El Calafate? In the 90s, there was just a tiny village here. And today, there are 5-star hotels and an international airport. All of this was built thanks to 3 glaciers. This ice itself is worth nothing, but it has brought this place more than any herds of cattle ever could. Perito Moreno. There you have this wall of ice as tall as a 20-story building. You stand on the observation deck, and suddenly there's a crash so loud that the ground literally shakes, and a chunk of ice the size of a truck collapses into the lake. A wave rolls out, silence falls, and then another crash. When the glacier rumbles, you immediately try to figure out where is that ice breaking off. But the sound travels slower than the image. So the ice has already collapsed, but the crash reaches you a bit later. And almost every time you don't manage to catch it in time. You see, there's the wave, so that's where the chunk of ice broke off. And then you get on a boat and sail across this lake. The Argentina sails past floating icebergs, to other glaciers as well, to Uppsala, Spegazzini, and the Dry Glacier. 3 or 4 glaciers in a single day. And here is ice, which seems to be worth nothing, yet to this place, to this country, it has brought more than any herd of cattle ever could. This is a new kind of wealth in its purest form. And here is a story that sounds like a fairy tale, but it's real. El Chaltén. In 1985, Argentina and Chile were disputing this piece of Patagonia. The Argentinians put up a few houses and planted their flags. In 1991, only 41 people lived here. And now it's the trekking capital of the world. The silhouette of the local mountains became the logo of the Patagonia brand. A city invented for a territorial dispute has turned into a global brand. By accident. Bariloche. A city founded by Swiss settlers. And there the lakes are just impossibly beautiful in color. And it has the best chocolate in the country. And here's another example. This is an immigrant settlement that has become one of the main tourist brands of South America. Here, there's skiing in the winter. In the summer, there are lakes and trekking. And as for the chocolate, obviously it's available all year round. And from Bariloche, you can take a boat and sail to Victoria Island, where there's a forest of dead trees with such warm reddish bark. According to legend, it was this very forest that inspired Walt Disney for the forest in the cartoon Bambi. And so you walk along the wooden walkways and actually catch yourself thinking that you've already seen all of this in the cartoon. Such a unique place that exists only here. This treasure has always been here, while Argentina spent 100 years fighting with itself over meat and money. But that's not all. There is an Argentina that the world has hardly seen yet. The Valley of the Moon and Chagualasta. 230 million years ago, dinosaurs lived here. Well, now it's tourists who walk here, or the Talampaya Canyons. Red walls as tall as apartment buildings. Right nearby, a serpentine road through the mountain pass, and around every turn, the Andes. And then comes the Puna, a huge high-altitude plateau at 4,000 meters above sea level. The Pumice Desert, something unimaginable. Thousands of rocks stretching to the horizon, each one looking like a marshmallow. Some kind of marshmallow. There are lakes with pink flamingos and salt flats with a white crust. Cono de Arita is a perfect natural pyramid, a volcano that tried to erupt, failed, and froze in place like that. Or the Devil's Desert, these are red rocks of bizarre shapes and white dunes that look like walls of sand. All these places could easily stand alongside the best national parks in the world. But the world simply doesn't know about them. And the infrastructure here is still in its infancy. This is reminiscent of the Argentine steppe, the Pampas, 100 years ago, which used to feed the whole world with its meat. It's a huge resource that's just waiting. For now, it's just waiting. And here's another interesting point. Beneath where I'm standing right now lies lithium, a metal without which not a single smartphone or Tesla can function. Argentina, Chile, and Bolivia form the lithium triangle, holding 60% of the world's reserves. This is Argentina's third potential wealth, after meat and beauty. And the question is the same as it was 100 years ago. Will it learn this time not to squander what it has? Jujuy Province. Here the mountains are truly rainbow-colored, and here live people who have survived absolutely everything. The Incas, the conquistadors, Peron, and 9 defaults. Their economy, coca, llamas, and ponchos, does not depend on the dollar exchange rate. And it is precisely they who now stand in the way of the lithium corporations. The lithium boom could make Argentina rich. Or it could repeat the story with meat. Enrich the elite and actually destroy those who currently live on this land. In general, traveling around Argentina feels like a trip around the world. When I ask my tourists about their impressions after the tour, this is probably the main thing they talk about. So we have the feeling that we've seen the whole world, even though we never left one country. We've been in the snow, next to penguins, in the mountains, in the jungle, among waterfalls, in the tropics, and in the desert. We've literally seen everything. If you want to join our groups, I organize group tours in Argentina in the fall and spring, and I can also arrange any custom individual tour upon request. You can find all the details and dates at the link in the description. And also, check out my videos about the 10 most interesting places in Argentina and 20 things I wish I had known before I came to Argentina for the first time. And now, about what's happening right now. Because Argentina is once again trying to save itself. In December 2023, Javier Milei became president. He's a libertarian economist with a chainsaw. And the chainsaw is not a metaphor. He really did carry it to rallies. And it became a symbol of his intention to cut away everything unnecessary from the state. And he did cut it away. Instead of 20 ministries, Argentina now has only 10. 56,000 officials have been fired. He slashed subsidies for utilities, and utility rates have increased several times over. It's like shock therapy without anesthesia. But are there any results? Yes, there are. Inflation, which was 25% per month in December 2023, has now dropped to 2 to 3%. For the first time in 14 years, the budget is in surplus. GDP has grown by more than 4%. And in the autumn 2025 elections, Milei's party won by a wide margin. But poverty is still at 32%. That's every third person. Half of all children under 14 live below the poverty line. Shock therapy hits hardest those who had nothing to begin with. Will Milei be the one to finally break this 100-year cycle? Or, as usual, will the pendulum swing back in 5 years? The last day, Iguazu Falls. 275 cascades, 4 kilometers wide. One of the 7 natural wonders of the world. And here you are walking along the boardwalks, it's roaring so loudly that you can't even hear your own thoughts. Spray hits your face, you're soaked through. But there's a rainbow within arm's reach. And then you come out to the devil's throat. And you feel like the ground is slipping out from under your feet, because right in front of you is an abyss. And millions of tons of water are crashing down into it. This country has everything. Land, oil, lithium, glaciers, waterfalls, desert, educated people. A culture that has conquered the world. 100 years ago, it got rich on a piece of meat and decided it would last forever. It didn't work out. But while it was losing one kind of wealth, the world came and showed it another. That the country itself is a treasure. Glaciers that build cities. Mountains that create brands. Penguins that earn foreign currency. In 100 years, Argentina has learned how to lose. The question is, will it learn how to preserve? And what if you want to see all this with your own eyes? In person, the link is in the description.